Greetings, everyone. My name is Iryna Manukovska, and this is Make Your Innovation Works. And today I'm very pleased to host Douglas Board. Douglas is one of the most experienced executive coaches I ever met. And he has an incredible experience and wisdom related to actually how to approach the career shift and how to approach your career so it could feed your life goals as well. So it's not only about earning the money, it's more about maybe fulfillment. And Douglas, can you tell a little bit more about yourself, your body of work? I know that you're author of a couple of incredible books and more are coming. So tell us a little bit about your experience and your relations with a career shift. Maybe you had one during your extensive career.
Yeah, two or three, I think. So I was born in Hong Kong. I'm half British, half Chinese. I live and work out of London. Um, I did mathematics at university, pure mathematics. Very emotionally underdeveloped I was, and my first career was for 10 years in the Ministry of Finance in London, not as an economist but economic policy. Um, then I did my first career shift that no one else was really expecting, because I didn't think that staying as a financial civil servant was going to fulfill me for another 40 years. And of all things, I became a headhunter, executive search. We can talk about that, maybe how that happened, if that's relevant. But that was completely astounded my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance, because I was perceived to be doing very well there. And headhunting, really?
That's like different.
um, and then later, I after 20 years, really enjoyed headhunting, learned a fantastic amount, some of which I hope to be able to share. Actually, it was in that period I also first trained as a coach as well. But then later I did a doctorate in selecting people for senior roles. I've had some non-profit board roles, as you say. I've published some books around leadership, 2 applied research books, 2 satirical novels, 1 book on the glass ceiling. And 1 or 2 ideas still going. You yourself, though, Iryna, you've done an amazing number of career shifts, from auto racing to interior design.
I like to collect experience, like Indiana Jones, he liked to collect different kind of old stuff. So I
Ah,
collect different kind of experience. So I studied applied mathematics and I went to auto racing, digital marketing, interior design, and now I do innovations and change management. But I do feel that all my previous background empowers me with some special instruments which are not
hmm,
widely used in my industry today, but they work. And actually, any kind of experience related to relations, communications, and relations between people, stakeholder management, if we're talking
mhm.
about executive stuff, uh, it's crucial and important for any kind of occupation you want to succeed. So those kind of background, I think it's a transferable skill.
Well, um, I did very well at mathematics at university, but I didn't become an academic mathematician. But if you'd asked me then, how is it going to be useful to you, Douglas, since you've decided not to become an academic mathematician? I would have had no idea. I would have said, well, I don't know. I'm learning these theories about very abstract objects. And if I'm not a professional mathematician, I have no idea how that will be of any use. But in fact, what turned out to be of use, and I know these days there are many occupations, including in artificial intelligence and
Yeah.
elsewhere, that do use mathematics quite directly, but I wasn't very conscious of that. It's turned out to be really useful for me, basically because it means that I'm not scared to try to understand really complicated things. And when I was a civil servant, it might be a law, like social security law of the United Kingdom, incredibly complex logical object. But then later, as I discovered how complex we are as human beings and emotions, and actually career coaching, I do think is the most lovely complex thing that I've been lucky enough to get to work with. Mathematics doesn't help me do it. It just gives me the confidence that even if it's very complicated, maybe I can understand it.
So let's start at this point. So basically, any kind of like career shift starts from some personal story. I can bring mine, and I have one of the greatest story of all
Hmm.
time, Star Wars, about the Darth Vader. So he started as a good guy, and he made a dramatic career shift, becoming Darth Vader, and after that he changed his mind. I think it illustrates a lot that. When we're talking about career shifts, especially when you're not a young adult, but when you're like confident professional, your mid career, like late 30s, 40s, or early 50s. So it's combination of unfulfillment, my
Hmm.
experience. So you feel that you just not just overqualified for your current place of occupation, because in this case you can just change your company, but you feel that it's not very rewarding in terms of values, how you would like to change the world, and you start to think about, okay, I'm going to die at the end of the day, and what would be left? So only bank account or maybe something more. And this kind of question, it ignites internal conversation, and at some point maybe it's emotional decision. So for me it's always some kind of impulsive emotional decision. So I just, understand that, okay, it's not my cup of tea anymore, I want to change something. So what happens next? So for example, if I'm going to be your client or any other, so what do you suggest how to actually to understand what to do the next? Because when people start this career shift stuff, they think, okay, I will take couple of tests online, and now I
Hmm.
think, I presume there are like plenty of AI based
Hmm.
tests,
Hmm.
and they will figure out that I'm going to be like perfect accountant, or I don't know, zoologist, whomever, and I will just start to do this, or I can create some strategy, and people start to overthink a lot, and they stay inside their head. And when you're mid career, you have something to lose, your reputation, your status, your
Hmm.
income. Maybe you have some mortgage and kids, and you need to pay some bills, plenty of bills, I presume, if you're in your 40s. So, how to understand? I mean, what to do next, because it's like seems like the problem which is impossible to solve, because there are so many teeny
Hmm.
tiny problems and they're all interconnected. So what should I do? What should anyone do in this kind of situation? How to understand? I mean, is it worth of changing? When it's worth of changing? How to start change? I mean, there are a lot of
You did say we
questions.
had. You did say we had 3 hours, didn't you, Iryna, for this?
No, we have
Um,
2 days, so no worries. It's going to be endless translation. Yeah, live show.
um, Let me be real about an equivalent moment for me, and start there because that helps make it real. But then I'll try and say some generalizations. But I'll just say once and not keep saying all through the conversation. When I offer a generalization, it is sincerely offered because I have seen it be helpful to a broad range of people. It clearly cannot be um, the right answer for every single person in every situation. But let's start with my equivalent of the moment of. So I described this in my book Elites. I was a very successful headhunter. I was really enjoying the work. Um, I think I was approaching 50. Um, I really enjoyed the work and I was making a lot of money and there was constant variety, which kept me stimulated. So nothing was going wrong. But I had a disquiet, which you already named, which was, is this all there is before I retire and die? And I didn't know whether there was anything else. I didn't even know if that was a sane question to ask, but it was the question that my body was
Hmm.
asking. And one time I was on a learning trip organized by an NGO, which took leaders and executives from some Western countries to some countries like India, to the BRICS countries, as they were called then, Brazil, Russia, India, China, for learning experiences to meet both um, powerful capitalists and technologists, but also to meet um, grassroots people in need, people in social change. And for me, it was one morning in Mumbai. A group of 5 of us had chosen the option to meet some migrant construction workers who were sleeping on the streets of Mumbai. And for 3 or 4 hours, starting before dawn, and we were driven around in a small van to 3 or 4 places on around Mumbai, where there were migrant construction workers, many of them women, some of them with infants, who had been sleeping on the streets, who climbed bamboo scaffolding to build Mumbai's skyscrapers, and who are hired by the day. So one of the things I realized as the morning wore on and we did our third or fourth visit and the sun was shining, was more hot, um, that the women we were meeting then uh, probably were not going to get work that day. And the whole combination of things, we had interpreters, and basically they gathered curiously around us to ask us, what are we doing? What are you doing here? And in a way, we were also asking them the same thing. I came away from that morning with, I had not learned anything new rationally. I had learned something had shifted for me emotionally. Um, I came away from that morning thinking, Douglas, the world requires so many people to cope with so much insecurity in their daily lives. If you, I was speaking to myself, if you, with your privilege, your education, your social capital, your country not at war, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, if you say that you are not brave enough to step off the high earning merry-go-round of being a headhunter, to explore, to face the unknown, to still have to earn a living. I had some savings, but not to last forever savings. It was a conversation with myself where I said, well, if you do not have the courage to do that, then really you should just be taken out and shot, because just look at the world around you and what people immensely have to face. So I didn't resign the next morning. So to come to what action, but a seed of determination was planted, and then I started to make some rational plans. Okay, so your question. So um, what's
And
what are
should
good
we?
rational
So
plans?
before you
Mm.
came here, so one quick question here. So should we look for these seeds of determination? I mean, this kind of new experience which can evoke something within us so we could understand better ourselves, our values, and what we actually like to do or dislike to do. Should we look for this experience intentionally, consciously?
Yes, I think so. But that's that comes after more years of experience. So first piece of advice is, and it's brilliantly put in an article which I know you've also read by the INSEAD professor Herminia Ibarra, who did a fantastic, still very, very good Harvard Business Review article called How to Stay Stuck in Your Career. Um, and that how to stay stuck is to adopt wholly the planning, implementation, rational model. The I must gather data, I must solve 17 simultaneous equations. You said yourself how complex it is, and then work out a plan, a risk managed plan, etc., etc. Well, guess what you're going to say, um, stuck. And what she explains there is that what we need to do is, if you like, follow the coaching dictum, the famous coaching dictum. We are more likely to act ourselves into a new way of thinking than think ourselves into a new way of acting. So it's very important to take actions, and almost any action's better than no action, but exploratory action. She also highlights the importance of networks, but not just conventional networking, how you add more people to your contact list who know about things that you think you want to know about, but more like I said in Mumbai, just encounter, think about the social groups of people who you encounter in your life and work, and if you can and want to expand them. So my answer is yes, because actually I'm a lot influenced by a South African philosophy called Ubuntu. And my translation of Ubuntu, there are different ones around, but my translation is parts of each of us are hidden in diverse other people. So if you do not know a very diverse set of other people, you may not find parts of yourself. And in a way, you could interpret what happened for me in Mumbai, um, by encountering some women who are extraordinarily different from me. In a way, they gave me a piece of myself. So it is not about disabling the mind. It is not about being stupid. It is not about being rash. I did not resign that morning in a flurry of emotion. Um, but it is about knowing that you will not be able to plan your way out of it. So, how do you get your rational mind to co-cooperate with your emotions and with experimentation, and not just sit in a dominant place, um, controlling everything?
And I would stop you here as well. So I like this like cooperation between the mind and emotions, because when people experience this career shift, they basically are anxious and frightened a little bit about consequences that may follow. So how to cope with that? Because we can't collect all the data and create incredible risk
Mm,
management plan, basically because it's impossible. But what we can do, because if we won't establish this dialogue between our rational
mm,
and emotional, we won't do anything. So we are going to like procrastinate or whatever,
mm.
but we're going to avoid literally the actions, like step ins, like
Yeah. So
Professor
just
Iryna told. Yeah.
some classic pitfalls that I've been part of myself, but also then a practical suggestion. So one of the most classic pitfalls is a money pitfall. Um, there can indeed be very serious financial consequences or demands arising from a change. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't. But equally, I have observed in dealing with people, particularly, say, forgive me, investment bankers or very rich lawyers or whatever, that it's very, very easy to be in the situation that no matter how much money you have, it's never enough for you to feel safe to make the career change. The number of times I used to meet with investment bankers, and they would be very interested to have a very excitable conversation, some of them, about diverse other things they could do, usually involving scuba diving or something. Um, but and I would say then, well, when? Because they got their bonuses in what, December, January or something. When? Oh, just this year's bonus, and then I'd meet them again a year or two later, and so on. So that is, money can be a challenge, but take some comfort from the perspective that actually even people with a lot of money can be a trap. So
Hmm.
perhaps we just need to think differently about the money aspect of it. Then the next thing is the just the plan and talk, but not act. So plan means you're going to study lots of websites, you're going to do lots of introvert hours, but you're going to be accumulating data, and it's not going to be enough. The talk is the extrovert option, at dinner parties, in the wine bar. um, you will flow with energy of conversation around the new life and how you need to change and what it might be, but still no action. That also can be the extrovert version of that trap. So, better, what can you do instead? Um, well, if you are lucky enough that you do not have a cliff edge coming, like you're being made redundant or you have some decisive event happening in your personal life that maybe you didn't wish for, I would say, I'd say the most crucial insight is to take yourself sufficiently seriously to realize that your transition should be a team project, that one person is exactly the wrong number of people to get behind working together to produce this result. So, the very first thing I think to stop paralysis is to start thinking, who is going to be your little support group? Who is going to be your little team that over the next, let's just say, 18 months, um, have a shared team goal, which is that you make some actual progress towards this unknown,
So
towards
can
this
some kind of
shift.
like accountability body work for this matter?
Like, sorry, accountability. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, like
exactly.
accountability buddy. You know that you
Mm,
start jogging each
mm.
morning together, something like this.
Yeah, so it can be a buddy accountability with like minded. I think that can be helpful. But suppose there aren't any like-minded people wanting to do career shifts, then I think the ideal team um, to support you is, it needs two or three friends who I would call, say, three friends who I would call energizers, and one friend that I would call wise. So, energizers, these might not be doing similar work to you. One might be your personal trainer, one might be an aunt. Doesn't matter. The energizers are people who you don't really know how or why, but when you meet them and spend time with them, you almost always come away with your morale up, believing in possibility again, with more energy than when you went into the conversation. But they can do quite diverse things and may not know about the kind of worlds that you are in, looking at changing. You need about three of them, and I'll explain why in a minute. Um, but you then also need a wise person. So a wise person is probably going to know about you and going to know something about the worlds that you are operating in. And you would someone who you would say has genuine wisdom. And we want to ask them to be more like a non executive director of your change project. So, to start with where I was saying, making a commitment, I'd start by finding your wise person, explaining that you actually want over the next, I just invented 18 months, it could be some different frame, that over the next 18 months, you want to make some real progress towards cracking this career shift stuff. At least that you will not in 18 months' time be sitting there saying, I'm really stuck where I was, I still don't know any better. And your very first step is to say, I want to declare that goal and target to you and ask you to be some accountability for me and to are you willing to act over the next 18 months a bit like a non-executive director um, of my life in this respect. So non-executive director means we don't have to see them very often. It might just be every 2 or 3 months. Then over the next 18 months, um, you meet with them. And by asking them to do this, as opposed to just saying, oh, I have got a wise person. Yes, I go and see her. No, no, you're asking them to play a role like a non executive director that empowers and requests them to ask you questions, to challenge you on progress, to say 3 months on, you thought you might do A or B or C. Did you do A or B or C? So that's step one is just need one of those. And of course, with internet, they don't even have to be in the same part of the world as you. Um, but your encouragers, probably a bit more face to face. Whatever you do, and perhaps this connects with other kinds, the long journey of making other kinds of innovation too. But here we're innovating in your career. Your encouragers are, it's going to be a long journey where you knock on lots of doors, you get disappointments, you get no replies, you run into brick walls, and you will certainly have experiences where you think this is completely mad. Why on earth did I ever start thinking like this? And I say three of them because if you say to them, look, guys, I am starting this project and I am going to need some support. And you are one of the people who really does some magic for me to help me see the world right side up again and have some energy and confidence. So all I'm asking is, can we have a coffee maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks, just over the next 18 months? And maybe we would do anyway, but I'm asking you to be part of my team and to ask about progress. And by having three, if you have, um, if you ask them every 6 weeks, then every fortnight you can be having in your diary a coffee with an energizer. And this matters because it can be very, very lonely and very sapping of energy at times. There will be highs as well, but at times, really low energy, and you're not sure why you're bothering. And putting a little structure in place, which means that within 2 weeks, you are going to be sitting down with someone who energizes you, who knows you're trying to do this, and you'll get a little boost. Just don't try and do it on your own if you possibly can avoid it. I just think one is really the wrong number, and it's why so many attempts fail. And people will mostly be very glad and honored to be asked, and of course, really interested to know how you get on, genuinely interested.
I think a lot of people may be, a little bit embarrassed if they're already in their mid careers or they obviously
Mm,
have accomplished something. So for them to acknowledge that this was, I can't say it was not best choice, because when you made it, it was a
mm,
best choice. You didn't have any kind of options. I mean, you made this choice and it was best during those times, circumstances, and
mm.
whatever. But they may feel a little bit, embarrassed that they may see this situation as a fail, because they put a lot of time and effort in building this career, and now they're thinking about like residing, changing, whatever. And it may be difficult to present this to your circle of contacts, and maybe most of them won't understand this. So yeah, I think this
I think
uh,
you're right. There's first of all, there are some there's some people in one circle of contacts who cannot play this role. That is if they are very negative people, if they are very blinkered people, but fundamentally, if they themselves are quite insecure, then they won't be able to support you, because you're being willing, you're actually becoming as a stronger person, because of course it isn't a failure. um, it isn't about having made a failed choice. It's actually about being not dead yet. It's about being still alive. It's about really taking yourself seriously in a world that is changing so fast, and we are alive. We are changing too. So actually it's an act of strength, and it's an act of life, and it's an act of life giving. But you're quite right that the individuals who have not made those choices for themselves, or who find those too scary to think about, will find it very difficult to be supportive, because it awakens too many questions for themselves about should they be examining what they are doing in their own career.
yeah, just some kind of mirror they prefer not to look into.
Yeah.
And like bring in more perspective. So I'm originally from Ukraine, and what I see from different peers from my country, because of this war situation we have, especially for women. So some of them, they move to another countries, and I think it's relevant for any kind of expat, not only for Ukrainian war situation. But you want to move to another country, or you were forced to move to another country, and you have perfect skill set for your country, you have experience in your country, but it's not valid, it's not eligible in different contexts. Obviously, if you were Google alumni or Facebook alumni,
Mm.
everything would be okay. But we're talking about, regular situations like accountants, and I don't know, financial people, whomever. So it's one type of situation I hear a lot in my network, and a lot of women who flew there also in their like 40s, so that they have kids, family to feed, so it's complicated. And the another track I see it gender agnostic. So maybe those persons, they started to build their own business and some startup or entrepreneurship, any kind of, and they succeed at some point, but they still don't feel this, satisfaction. They don't feel the real genuine like award, curiosity and energy in what they're doing. And those are like maybe the most two typical situations I see in my network. Is there any kind of like a piece of advice? I understand that every situation is different, but based on your experience,
Well, let me just try and
yeah.
offer something for the first one. I'm not sure anything's quite coming to me quickly for the second one, but for the first one, um, so um, some organizations will use competency based interviewing or competency based application processes, and then a whole lot of others are not so professional and they do not. But I wanted to mention that because hopefully, amongst people listening to this conversation, they might recognize the idea of competency based interviewing. But even where you have um, a competency based employer, um, to take achievements and things that have been done in a very different context that is not easily understood, take that there is quite a storytelling and translation skill
Hmm.
required to do that. And and to do it in a way where it's succinct and it captures the person's imagination. So so again, my answer is going to be, we really don't help ourselves by expecting one poor human being able to do all this. Um, Sometimes it's more than one can do to have just been able to deliver the achievements. One doesn't have the gift to also describe the achievements in a very succinct way, especially to a different culture. But perhaps in those diaspora or those communities, again, if we could be brave enough to reach out and say, is there someone in this community who maybe has a bit of writing skill, a bit of journalism, or a bit of HR? Um, could we maybe even share as a communal resource some examples of how to take, for example, I had to do this particular type of in wartime, what this
Hmm.
involved, etc., etc. Translating that into competencies in a completely different context. If we can reach out and find someone who has got a little bit of patience to listen to us tell the long version of the story and to work with us to find in language that we are comfortable to use um, a way of making, I do believe that actually, if the communication effort can be applied, those could be captivating and therefore potentially hireable stories. Um, but it's a skill of its own. And why would the person who has
Yeah.
done the achievement also have to be the person who can distill
Uh,
that? I don't mean making up stories for people. I mean listening carefully to someone, listening to the detail, asking questions like, "Oh, so you organized a kindergarten in a war zone or some, I don't know, whatever it was, and what did this involve? Whether this and this the person who's going to write the story has to ask lots of questions about the detail, and then like an editor they stand back and they say, okay, let me offer you, here's how I would try and tell this story in just a short amount of time with a certain selection curation of details that will really make it come alive even for someone who's never um, been there, because otherwise often I think people feel are tongue tied. It's kind of like, how can I tell you my experience
yeah,
when
but
my starting point is so different from anything that you know?
and I
um,
will interrupt you here just for a second. So I have a huge imposter syndrome, and for me, any kind of like about section writing or CV or any kind of piece of this kind of information I need to provide, like for a keynote, whatever, it's a very huge deal. So basically, what had I found? I'm using AI to help me to do this. So I have a
ah,
confident like facts what I've done. Those are solid facts. I mean you can't invent them. So and I ask them, okay, help me for this kind of matter
mhm,
based on my experience, facts, craft for like I don't know UK, Sweden, whatever culture, about section for a conference for this type of I don't know keynote speech, and it helps a lot because it's rooted in fact. So for me, it's very hard to argue with it, and it's more intimate because sometimes it may be hard. You feel insecure,
mm,
asking for help, and it could be a starting point. It's not the best way to resolve this, so it's better to find someone with real experience because AI can't replace humans, but it can help you, to have
mm,
the
certainly
starting
can.
point and set of like ideas to validate
Mm,
and to go to talk to. So for those who have like similar imposter syndrome stuff like me, I highly recommend. It helps a lot just to break the ice and create some kind of starting point.
great. Absolutely, it's merely my age that meant that I didn't think of that myself. I wanted to, before we finish, get something in about hope. Is that possible?
Oh yeah, I think just to sum up, so we need to be very brave to start this kind of journey, and this intention come from inside, and you can't be brave without hope and faith in something, because you need to have some kind of north star. So in terms of this, based on your experience, what I wanted to ask, so how how this perspective or like work life balance, success, and understanding of what matters in life evolves through the career for people, because obviously, I mean, for people in their 20s,
Mm,
30s, 80s, totally
mm.
different understanding what success means. maybe it's also could be some kind of, like a benchmark for other people to understand that they're not alone if they
Yeah.
feel like this.
So I'm going to just point to reference a few different resources, which I think you might put on the end or post somewhere. If you, the one of them may be new that I wasn't on my list to start with. Um, and really the theme that I'm just wanting to close on, and by pointing to these resources, is the idea of um, actually during this long, difficult transition, and perhaps also true just with ordinary innovation as well as career innovation, one needs hope. But where do you find hope and stay realistic in a difficult world? Well, in relation to career transitions, I stress again that in reality, a lot of hope can come from building a group of people and not trying to do it all yourself. But here are some additional points. My own philosophy of hard-won philosophy of hope, I have never found it to be true that you can get whatever you dream of. I have never found that to be true in life. And as a coach, I have never told my clients that they simply must be able to dream of something and dream very hard and somehow it will come true. It's just not been that world for me. I do believe, though, here is my version of hope. I do believe and have lived that if we are brave, we can find more than we ever dreamt of. That I think is true. So I do not think that you can simply go from A to B by wishing very hard for B. But if you are willing to be brave and journey, you may not end up at B, but you can end up with something that's recognizably far more than you ever dreamt when you were at A. I certainly profoundly believe that. Right, some practical resources. So for the for people for the process of as one gets older, um, why does our body send us signals to say maybe time to rethink? There is a fabulous Harvard Business Review article called "The Existential Necessity for a Midlife Crisis." Um, I hadn't planned to quote it, so I haven't got the authors' names here, but that's pretty much the exact title. So you'll be able to find it. And I highly recommend it. You don't need a psychological background, but it basically kind of says, guess what? Growing up didn't finish when you were 21 or 31 or even 41. So there's that. I really recommend for Feeding the Soul a book by David White, Whyte, called Crossing the Unknown Sea: Work as a Pilgrimage of Identity. It's a beautifully written, slim book, and he started as someone who graduated with a marine biology degree, and there were no jobs in marine biology at the time. But eventually he found one. But then, as he explains in the book, all the things we're talking about, he felt the impetus and the need to make a profound change. And he writes beautifully from experience about the anguish and the hope. And his career change took him to becoming a poet. And one of the reasons he writes so beautifully is he's one of the most successful business corporate poets who's made a lot of money out of poetry and insight from being a marine biologist and not knowing. But the book, you don't have to want to be a poet. You can just read it for human nourishment, the nourishment of the soul on the difficult journey. And the last thing I wanted to mention, and we'll go back to Star Wars, um, is a book which is not doesn't appear to about careers at all. This book is also quite useful if you are not thinking of career change, but you are leading difficult change in organizations and you're trying to inspire people who seem very stuck in their ways to change. So this book is by a Hollywood script doctor called Dara Marks, Dara Marks, and it's called Inside Story. I came across this book because one of my career changes was to be brave enough to admit that I wanted to try and write a novel, and not just any novel, a funny novel. And I had zero, zero credentials, no student newspaper activities, no, you know, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Anyway, long journey. Someone pointed me to this book from the point of view of being a writer, and I thought it also says something really dramatic and important about change in life. Because what Derek Marks basically says is, um, what's the difference between Star Wars, and she means the original Star Wars, original. What's the difference between Luke Skywalker and the original Star Wars, and why that character holds our attention, whereas versus Apollo 13 or Gravity. These can be very dramatic, action-packed movies, but the characters don't hold us. And she just basically advances a writing theory that says that the characters that hold us are when a story depicts significant change, a life cycle of significant change in how a human being is in this world. And she takes us through, from the story writer's point of view, what she expects to see happen in that journey of change. So I thought, well, let's just listen to this, not just from the point of view of a writer, but a point of view, therefore, as a guide to what we might expect as we, or not be surprised by, as we attempt a radical change in our lives. So she points to three moments. I'll just pick out three. One is when the new reality is breaking in, and the first person, for the first time, experiences some feelings when they start to realize that their existing way of seeing the world may not last them forever. And she describes that emotional moment quite clearly. Now, at that point, the person's existing support structure for seeing the world still works, but it's a significant moment where you're living in a house and you see one day there's a big crack in the foundations. You can still live in the house for some months, but something's happened. Then she describes actual moments of decision, and then she describes an action, some kind of action towards the new step. Maybe it'll be that you speak to someone as a result of this conversation and say you want to make a transition. And then she says, somewhere along the new path, she says the character will go through a moment of, the world is collapsing. I have left my old support structures behind. I feel completely stupid. I feel completely crazy. I feel like an idiot. I wish the earth would open up and swallow me. How could I have been so stupid? This is a predictable moment in the path, but it's not the end of the path. So, number one, for any and all of us contemplating career journeys, it's a fantastic read. It's not about careers. You can read about movies and DVDs and all of that, but you could also just think about it, what change might be like for you, and maybe get some courage from it, that there are those scary moments, but they're not the end, then life pushes through. But secondly, if you are a leader in an organization, maybe not doing career change, and you're just trying to get innovation or
You will
something
get the
to
same stuff
happen
on your way.
and you're trying to get some of your colleagues or your clients to 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 change, and you are trying to inspire them, and you're thinking, how can I inspire them? And you know that your facts and your spreadsheets, you've tried that so many times it doesn't work, and maybe you're thinking that maybe you should tell them a story to inspire them from your own experience. Well, what you could take from Darren Mark's book is, if as a leader you are trying to persuade other people to make change in your life, then make sure to tell them, like a Star Wars story, a story about your own life in which you actually change, and which therefore includes those three moments, including the moment of total vulnerability and looking like an idiot. Do not tell them an exciting story from your own life that is like Apollo 13 or Gravity, that can be full of action packed, heroic things, but in which you did not change. Because um, if you can't tell a story in which you went through that point when, having decided to make the change, you thought you were completely stupid, Why should you be persuasive to other human beings to persuade them to abandon some habits that have worked very well for them up to now?
And this work for two reasons. First of all, you give the roadmap for a brain, how it's going to happen, so it's not so scary now.
Mm,
And this very strong vulnerability issue, Brenna Brown talks a lot
yeah.
about. So we're like create extra bond because
Mm,
we feel the same uncomfortable about some
mm,
kind of situation, and it helps to create this trust and all of this. So for people it would be easier to accept the change situation, though it would be hard anyhow, but it would be much easier because it's not about I am the bravest person in the room and you're not the bravest. So it's like we're all maybe overwhelmed with something. Yeah. Okay, this was very powerful. Thank you. And I encourage everyone to be brave enough to have a hope and courage to change, and don't make this journey alone. Find people who can energize you and help to guide you, because it's going to be tough. But if you have your support group, you can come to a place you never have dreamed of. Thank you for bringing this piece of wisdom for me and other listeners.
Thanks to you, all your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much, Douglas, for joining me, and everyone who are joining us live and going to watch later. I encourage everyone to go through this podcast at least once before making your New Year resolution, because it's very helpful to create a plan which may works next year. Thank you.